just now starting to set in. It's crazy. I'm going to be selling this thing tomorrow. Before continuing on, I want to give a special thank you to Omaze for sponsoring this video. If you head to omaze.com/element, linked in the description below, you can enter for your chance to win a fully electric Volkswagen bus conversion. Pretty awesome. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, though, later in this video. I think it's cleaned up. I think we're good to go. I am meeting the buyer of the van tomorrow morning. In the afternoon, I have to get on a plane and fly it back up here. It's going to be a very long day. I'm trying to decide if I want to break up the drive a little bit and leave tonight. It's already almost 4 o'clock, so I better make that decision pretty quickly. But it is about a 6-hour drive to where I'm going outside of Philadelphia. So I'm thinking I'll probably break it up and maybe just get a hotel. Shannon does have more rewards points, and she offered to get me one more hotel here. I'm sure she's getting sick of doing that, but can't really stay in the van because I'm not going to have any of my bedding at all, and I have to fly, so I mean, I guess I could bring it down and throw out my bedding, but I don't really want to do that. Like, I might use that in the next van, so it'd be pretty tough to be able to stay in the van. And also, like, sleeping in it, it's going to be like 20 degrees again tonight. It was 19 last night. It's going to be in the 20s tonight. That doesn't really sound like much fun. I'm just going to knock out some of the drive right now. Seems like the safer call. Also, it's really weird driving my van. It's like weird to say that, but I kind of got used to the 2 different rental cars in Shannon's van, and now I'm driving this one, maybe for the last time. It's kind of surreal.
Welcome to New Jersey.
Shannon's points have really come in clutch here over the past month. This is the 3rd time I've used them, probably the last time. I just figured this was the safer and better option, guys. You know, leaving at 3:30 in the morning, driving for 6 hours, and then going through the sales process of signing over paperwork, and then obviously showing the new owner around the van and how to do certain things in the van, just made more sense to get a good night's rest before moving forward with this whole thing. And so tomorrow I still have 2 hours left. I did 4 hours, and I'm here in New Jersey, and then tomorrow I'm going to finish the last 2 hours of the drive first thing in the morning. During that drive, I do want to talk a little bit about our next van. We have kind of come to the conclusion and the decision that we are going to be going the JDM route. It's not 100% set in stone just yet. I haven't even seen the van yet that we're going to probably get, but it's pretty likely that that's the route we're going to go. And, you know, over the last couple of months since we did the video when we were checking out some of these vans a couple months ago, I've done a lot of research on this process. So even if for some reason we don't go this route, I kind of wanted to share some of that research that I've done with you guys. I mean, there's a lot that goes into this whole thing, and I've looked into the pros and the cons and a lot of different common questions and stuff like that. So I figure while I'm doing the drive tomorrow and finishing this drive, might as well talk about it a little bit. But for now, I'm going to try to get some rest. As I mentioned earlier, this video is sponsored by Omaze, and if you head to the link in the description below, you can enter for your chance to win a fully restored 1966 Volkswagen bus. This bus is a little bit different though because it does have a Tesla system in it, and it is a fully electric conversion done by Z-Electric, so you will not need to use gasoline in this bus. And you would also enter for the chance to win an additional $20,000 to be able to help you out on your road trip wherever you go with your new Volkswagen bus. And when you enter, you also are able to make a contribution to the Reverb organization, which partners with musicians and music festivals as well as concert venues to help make a positive environmental impact. Definitely a cool organization, and like I said, if you follow the link in the description, it's omaze.com/element. You can enter for a chance to win this bus. Thanks again, Omaze, for sponsoring this video. So regarding importing a JDM vehicle, and in particular JDM campers, because that's primarily what I've been researching here over the last few months, there are a number of reasons why we have decided to go this route, and I guess that means I should probably start with the pros here on this little list of pros and cons. One of the major pros is the size. of these vehicles compared to traditional American RVs, American Class Cs, even some of the Class Bs, the Pleasure Ways and the Road Treks. These things are quite a bit more compact. They fit within a regular sized parking spot, even a smaller parking spot, and they still have a lot of the same features, or all of the same features, of a full-sized American RV. They're kind of designed to be driven around densely populated cities like those in Japan, and obviously we're not going to go to Japan or anything like that, but we do find ourselves in major cities pretty often. They also get excellent fuel economy because of their compact size. And then that kind of brings me to reason number 2, which is the fact that a lot of these vans, these camper vans, these Toyota Hiaces and Mitsubishi Delicas have 4-wheel drive, which means that you can convert them into overlanding vehicles, which is exactly what we're hoping to do. So that when we do get into those situations where we are off-road, or we're in the middle of Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument and we're going down a road that's not a road really anymore and it's more of just a washed out complete disaster area, we'll be in a better position to have 4-wheel drive, to be able to have maybe even a lifted setup and a better overlanding setup. So that is one of the most important things here. You can't really find 4x4 vans here in the United States. I mean, they do exist, but a lot of the time you have to do the conversion aftermarket. It gets very, very costly. This is a more affordable way to get a better overlanding 4x4 vehicle, and so that is a big reason why we're going this route. And that brings me to the third point, which is the fact that the price is reasonable. And that's not to say that these things are cheap. It is not cheap to import a vehicle from Japan. You have to spend like $4,000 minimum just to ship the thing here, plus the cost of buying it over there, plus exporting fees, plus importing fees, plus taxes and all that. I mean, it adds up. It adds up for sure. But, you know, compared to even buying a similar aged Class B RV here in the US, the price is pretty comparable. In fact, it's relatively competitive. Sometimes it's even about the same. You look at these Class B RVs online, these Pleasure Ways, these Road Treks here in the US, you find mid-90s ones priced above $20,000, $30,000 all the time. So comparatively, compared to an American domestic Class B RV, they're relatively similarly priced. And then on top of that, you get the benefit of having 4-wheel drive and being able to convert it into an awesome overlanding vehicle. I think the fourth pro here concerns the reliability of these Japanese vehicles. It is safe to say that they are notoriously very reliable, especially some of the diesel engines made by Toyota, the 3L, the 1KC turbo diesel. Like, these are extremely long-lasting engines, and they are running to this day all over the world. Even the ones from the late 80s and the 90s, they are really, really solid vehicles. And that brings me to the last pro here on the list, and that's just that these vehicles are kind of cool. And, you know, that's very subjective, and that's not really the most practical reason, and I am definitely more about the practical side of things than anything else. But I've always been very interested in the Japanese domestic market. There are a lot of really, really awesome vans and vehicles that were made over in Japan that we never really got here in the United States. So I don't know. Like I said, that's kind of more of a subjective thing, but at the same time, I think it's worth noting as one of the pros. And now it is time to move over to the cons of importing a JDM vehicle, and there definitely are some concerns. A lot of folks suggested some of these concerns in the comments when we did that video a couple of months ago. I think number one is the age of these vehicles. Because of some import laws that exist here in the United States, these vehicles have to be 25 years old in order to bring them into the United States. In Canada, it is 15 years old, which I think is a lot more reasonable. And I'm not going to get into the reasons that these laws exist or anything like that. I can maybe talk about that in a future video, but the bottom line is they do exist, and that does pose some challenges because older vehicles are more likely to break down and more likely to have issues. And that sort of directly plays into con number 2, which is definitely my biggest concern, and that is parts availability. I know a lot of folks suggested this in the comments on the last video that we did about the JDM camper van scene, and it's definitely a reasonable concern. How are you going to find someone that's willing to work on these, and how are you going to get parts if you break down on the road? But I have done a ton of research on this to the point where I do feel more confident in getting a JDM vehicle because there are amazing resources online. There are tons of owners clubs and owners communities on Facebook which you can reference that are very, very active, and there are also great websites, and there are websites overseas in Japan and in other countries across the world where you can just order these parts, have them shipped via DHL. A lot of the time they're even cheaper than their counterparts would be here in the US for a domestic vehicle, and you have them shipped via DHL, within a few days they are here. So it's definitely a possibility to get parts, you do have to put in a little bit more legwork. But I am also going to have quite a few spare parts just available, just random things, oil filters, brake pads, things that I'm going to likely need for maintenance reasons on the road, and maybe anything that I can think of, maybe fuel injectors and glow plugs and stuff like that. That's more than likely what I'm going to be doing, stockpiling, making sure that I have what I need just in case something does go wrong so that I can troubleshoot, get us to wherever we need to go to receive the said parts, and hopefully get them as soon as possible to get back on the road. It will definitely add to the adventure, but like I said, there are huge communities of people. I am not the first person to own a JDM vehicle here in North America. There are tons and tons of people that have done it before me and are doing it currently. Moving on to the next con here, and that is just the risks associated with buying a vehicle from the other side of the world, right? Like there are risks. My way of kind of dealing with some of these risks is to go through an importer, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a couple of minutes here, but that kind of helps to mitigate those risks. You know, if you're buying it from an exporter, which is another option, it's not the same as buying a vehicle here in the US. It's a little bit harder to get that information when you are buying a vehicle from overseas like this. So that is definitely con number 3, and that brings me to con number 4, which is the process of registering and insuring these vehicles. And there is definitely a little more legwork. You have to do a little bit more research. They are not your typical American car. It's not the same as buying a vehicle here. They don't have a traditional VIN. You know, you're not just going to be able to type it in online on your Progressive or your Geico website and just get insurance and that's it. You know, you're going to have to call someone and talk to them about it. And the same applies for registering it as well. Because they don't have a traditional VIN, they do not have an American title, you're going to have to get an American title. You're going to have to move through with that process. That being said, based on the research that I've done, I've already made a lot of these phone calls, guys, and it seems very, very possible. And I don't really see any issues. I do see that I had to do a little bit more legwork. I had to make some phone calls, had to talk to quite a few people, the DMV in Florida, as well as my insurance agent. But it's looking like things are going to be fine. And I will keep you guys posted on that as we move forward with this process. But as of now, aside from a little bit of extra legwork, it is definitely possible to get the vehicle registered and insured. And that brings me to the last con, which is more of a joke than anything else. It's just the fact that the steering wheel is on the opposite side. For me, I see that as more of a pro. I think that it's going to be kind of fun to be able to drive, on the other side of the car. I think that it might just make things a little more interesting, guys. I've driven back and forth across the United States for the last 5 years, dozens of times, constantly driving all around between north and south and east and west and east and all that. And, it just might make things a little more interesting to have to switch it up and drive on the other side. And that kind of brings me to the final questions here, the closing points of this little discussion. And the number one question is, how do you actually get one of these vehicles? And there are 2 routes that you can go here. You can talk to an exporter in Japan, but the issue with going the exporter route from Japan is that you kind of are exposed to a lot of risks, like I mentioned a little bit earlier in this video. So you're basically bidding on these vehicles at auction based on 3 pictures and an auction sheet. And then if you win the bid, you have to, if you win the auction, you have to then wire a bunch of money, thousands and thousands of dollars, to some random guy in Japan, and then you have to manage the exporting process, and then you have to figure out how to ship it via ocean freight to a port here in the U.S., and then you have to hire a customs broker to receive it from the port, make sure that it clears customs, and then you have to get it from the port to wherever you're going to work on it. You obviously don't want to drive it right away because it's been on a boat for 3 months, and it could have a lot of issues. It might not even start up for all you know, and if you do drive it, you could cause severe damage to it. So there's a lot of risks going the exporting route. The other option is to work through an importer, which is what we've decided to do to avoid all of those risks that I just mentioned a second ago. We are working with Northeast Auto Imports in New Hampshire, and I know that we had kind of visited him in a previous video. Derek is the owner there. He's been really, really awesome, super, super helpful. I would definitely recommend them. If you do reach out to them, be sure to let them know that I sent you and that you came from this video here. And the benefit of going through an importer like that is that you don't really have to deal with a lot of the risks that I just mentioned. They have done this hundreds and hundreds of times before, so they have a process down, and they're able to kind of make sure that it's going to be ready for the road, and you're not going to have any, at least immediate, issues with these 25-plus-year-old vehicles. So, and regarding working on the vehicle, I know another concern is like how you find a mechanic to actually work on one of these JDM vehicles. Like most mechanics here in the U.S. have likely never seen anything like this, and they'll be pretty weirded out by it. That being said, they are relatively straightforward. You know, they're not the most complicated vehicles because they are 25 or more years old. And my goal, like I've said in previous videos, is to learn everything about this vehicle and be able to work on it as much as possible, short of like major transmission repairs and major engine rebuilds and stuff. I want to be able to do as much of it as I can. And if I do need to do something, you know, heaven forbid, something major, then we're going to have to find a mechanic. And, you know, the better mechanic is going to be able to figure it out. Like a good mechanic will be able to sort through some of these issues. I think that pretty much sums it up for this discussion. I know it was relatively long, but like I said, I've done a lot of research on this over the past couple of months, and even if for some reason we don't end up going this route, if something does fall through, I figured it was still worth making this video and sharing some of this research for anyone else out there who is considering importing a JDM van. I really do believe that this is a pretty interesting alternative to the current state of affairs here in the US, where it is relatively hard to find decent campers. I mean, people are looking for campers constantly because of the pandemic and everything, and it's very, very difficult to find RVs. And this is kind of an alternative to some of those struggles, and just the way that we kind of decided to, I guess, think outside the box a little bit. I'm very excited about this whole process, guys. I'll keep you guys posted. Right now, it is time to go finish the sale of this van. It's crazy. I'm in the last hour of my last drive of the NV200. It's a weird feeling watching the van drive away like that. A little bit emotional, but also like a little bit of a relief as well. Time to go to the airport. Safe to say it's been a pretty long week for me here. Seeing the van drive off into the distance like that was kind of a weird feeling, and it's just now starting to set in that I no longer own that van. But that being said, I am looking forward to the future, and I'm looking forward to seeing what will potentially be our next van. I will get to see it later this afternoon, actually. It's been a couple of days since I got back from Pennsylvania, and I'm really looking forward to checking it out. That's all going to be part of the next video, though, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you all in that one.